actually wrote that song as a protest after teen idol Normie Rowe was conscripted and sent to Vietnam in 1969.
It was unusual to have pop stars in the front line, but sadly it wasn't strange to have young men fighting and dying in Southeast Asia. We were in Vietnam for 11 years. It's the longest war we have ever fought.
Australia and New Zealand were the only Western nations to join the United States in Vietnam. It was a difficult and unpredictable guerrilla war, unlike anything we'd fought in before. 59,000 Australians served in Vietnam, 508 didn't come back. That death toll might have been much higher without the efforts of 43 Army nurses. The nurses worked 12-hour shifts in oppressive conditions at the Australian Field Hospital. Most of them had never dealt with worse than a road accident back home. Here, they were in a war zone, coping with all the horrific injuries of combat. Every day, choppers flew in the wounded, direct from the front line, and the nurses fought their own war, trying to save the lives of young Australian soldiers.
With Anzac Day coming up this Tuesday, it's a timely reminder of the sacrifices made in war.
Well, the work they did was extraordinary. So please welcome three of the very first nurses to arrive at the Australian Field Hospital back in May 1967. Maggie Hopcraft, Terry Ross, and Colleen Fergar.
Now, the three of you were in your 20s when you got the call to Vietnam. Colleen, how did you hear?
Well, it was a big secret. I had come back from work one night, turned on the radio and heard it over the radio that I was going to be one of the first four to go to Vietnam. So I raced down to the matron's quarters and said, "Is this true?" She said, "It's a secret." I said, "Well, it's not anymore." It's on the radio, and my mother could hear it. So I had to immediately ring my parents in and say I was going to Vietnam, which of course they didn't believe. So,
wow.
Yeah.
What was it like, Terry? What was it like when you first arrived, your first day?
It was a pretty big shock, mainly because we were very excited about going and we had not an idea in the world we were going to. So it came as stark reality when we arrived in all amongst this sand, like Bondi Beach. We had very basic accommodation. However, we thought, how lucky are we? Because everyone else was under a tent, so we were in the upper 5-star.
But you were all general nurses, general nursing duties. What was it like when you first arrived? What were you dealing with?
When we first got there, it was only a field ambulance, so we didn't have the hospital equipment. We only had a field ambulance. So we had no running water, we had portable sterilisers. All our theatre tables were only field tables, and so it was very basic.
What's the toughest period when you look back that you had to go through?
The Tet Offensive in 1968. That's when the North Vietnamese attacked every Allied base in South Vietnam, and the casualties were horrendous. They just kept coming and coming and coming, and we got one young lad in. They'd been out on patrol, and he trod a mine, and he knew he was standing on the mine because he felt it click under his boot. So he warned his patrol. Some of the survivors told us about it afterwards. And they all headed for cover, but he couldn't because he knew as soon as he took his weight off that mine, it would jump up and explode. So once he was pretty sure his mates were as safe as could be, he dived off. And as he dived and hit the ground, the mine exploded and it hit him in the buttocks. He was still alive when we got him. But there was nothing we could do, we tried. But as fast as we were putting blood and fluids into him, it was just pouring out on the floor. His injuries were so extensive and horrendous, we just could not do it. And he was the only soldier that we lost in the 12 months that we were there.
That is incredible work you must have done. And also, though, you were so much more than just nurses, weren't you?
The boys were quite thrilled, I think, to see a woman with a veil. I think sisters being called sister and wearing a veil gave the soldier a tremendous amount of confidence and respect, because they really didn't look at us as women. It was, one boy said to me, I haven't seen a woman for 3 months.
It was to lift their spirits, and Maggie used to put a dab of perfume on.
I was leaning over a table in the triage area. We had a soldier on it, and he said, oh, sister, you smell nice. And every time after that, I never went to work without perfume.
No.
And Terry always had a lippy in her pocket.
Well, I've been a lippy person forever.
But I'm sure those were the little things that would have made a difference. There were actually 4 nurses who first arrived, weren't there, in 1967. The 4th woman was Amy Pittendray, and sadly she couldn't join us tonight, but she has sent all of you a message.
Oh, lovely. Hello, Terry, Colleen and Margaret. Sorry I can't be over there with you, but you know, my heart's not as good as it used to be. But enjoy your evening. My love to you all.
Isn't that lovely?
Isn't that terrific?
She was the best boss a person could ever have.
You obviously all formed a very close bond. I would imagine working under those circumstances it would be very close, and you would all support one another in incredible ways. I know for you, Terry, in particular, there was someone who you described as your offsider who's quite a help. Well, we actually have him here tonight. Please welcome Harry Butterworth.
Now, Harry, tell us about the first day that you met Terry.
Oh, well, the lead up to that was I was transferred from an infantry battalion as a medical assistant, and I down to 8 field ambulance, which was later to become the hospital. Had a little spell in surgical and medical wards, and they told me I was going to work in intensive care. The day I went there must have been a quiet day because they were painting the place, you see. And one of the chaps had a tin of white paint. You remember this, don't you? No. Had a tin of white paint that was open. And I might have to just stand up to do this.
Yeah, sure.
That's right. So you've got... So Terry's there with and they had all starched uniforms on there, and he's there with a tin of paint, and he dropped it. And all the paint went straight up into the nether regions, you know what I mean? So, off came the slip, off came the stockings, his legs flashing around. I said, this is where I want to work.
Did a sense of humour play a big role in getting you all through what you were doing?
Everything. Everything.
If you didn't laugh, you cried, and you couldn't spend 12 months crying.
Yeah.
And young men are very, very funny. They still are.
Your old men are quite funny too.
They're funny when you get a bit older too.
Well, thank you all so much for coming in and joining us. And ladies and gentlemen, please thank our special guests here tonight. Maggie Hopcraft, Colleen Ferger,